Food and Beverage Magazine Live, bringing food and beverage to life. With your hosts, James Beard Award winner Jennifer English and Food and Beverage Magazine publisher Michael Politz. Featuring leaders in the hospitality, branded food and beverage, and CPG industries, many of whom are Jennifer and Michael's friends in the business. For an informal and informative conversation where friends in the business share the latest intel, ideas, and best practices. Live, juicy inside scoop from the tastemakers, newsmakers, bread bakers, drink shakers, spoon lickers, clam diggers, farms, foodies, and friends of the Food and Beverage Magazine World. Here are your hosts, Jennifer English and Michael Politz.
You know, we have a lot of friends in the business.
Well, lucky us. You know what they say, water seeks its own level. And if you have lovely friends, the old saying goes, tell me who your friends are and I can tell you who you are.
Ooh, that's not so good one for me. I don't even want to talk about my friends. I don't even know if they're my friends half the time.
Yeah, but you know what the thing that I love about our friends? They are really generous people. And they, like us, are looking at the world and saying, we're all in this together. Let's get through it together.
I'm hoping they say, oh, Michael's book comes out next week. Let's buy it.
Did you tell everybody we're going to have a launch party?
No, we're not having a launch party. I just got notification. It's in the warehouse, packed right now. Go to Amazon, type in Politz, and you'll get my book. Can you believe it? They're packed in a warehouse right now, and they're launching next week at all the Barnes.
Are you excited?
I'm a little excited. You can go into Barnes & Noble and pick it up, too.
Are you going to go to every Barnes & Noble and say, there's my book?
My mom is.
I love that.
I'm going to be shy. I'm shy about that stuff. I'm a little shy about that.
No,
but
I have to say, you are one of the most misunderstood people I've ever known in my life, because on the surface, people think you are gregarious and audacious and, bold and
handsome.
But you are also the
wait. Did you leave you left handsome out? You left handsome out.
I was getting there.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. But I'm also what? Keep talking about me. I like this show so far.
Well, you're also one of the menschiest I've ever known. You are just a consummately good guy. And people will assume lots of things, many of which are just not true.
But isn't that fun?
It's almost like you get to hide in plain sight. But
they're all bad things. Like, it's not like, wow, he is the wealthiest man I've ever met in my life. Right? It was never that. It was, God, that guy. And it's not even me. That guy would walk 1,000 miles without shoes on for his friend, right? He'd give his shirt off his back to anybody in the world, right?
You would literally give the shirt off your back to a friend.
Well, I'd feel super fat. First of all, let's start with that. It would be, and that would be a little harder to do, right? No, I'm sure I have I know I've given shorts off myself to people. What do you want to do?
I might like to know that juicy story, because you know what the theme of today's show is?
What?
You know how at the beginning of our promo and introduction to the show, we say juicy?
Oh, we do?
It's a juicy show.
Is it a juicy show?
Oh, it is a juicy.
And aren't we starting with the greatest juice that has ever been made?
Some will argue that we are going to be talking about and celebrating the greatest juice in the world. Of course, we're talking about wines that come from Napa Valley, California. Some people will say Italy, Spain, France. But what has happened in the last 50 years is that California has emerged as one of those glorious places that has been touched and literally given.
But how lucky are we to have this guest? How lucky are we? I don't even know how you did this. How did you do it, by the way?
Because this amazing woman who is from Napa Valley, California, that place that God touched and said, this is one of those places the good juice will come from. Let's see how long it takes them to figure out great juice can be made here. Took us a little while, but you got to remember, we didn't get to California until a little bit later. They were already making good juice in Europe and in other parts of the world, but that's that's jumping ahead a bit. Today's a
Oh,
juice.
look at this guy. He loves Opus One. Who, everybody loves Opus One.
Well, if you know anybody that loves wine and you said, what are the 5 most delicious wines you ever had from California? Invariably, people will say the Silver Oak Cellars, Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh, let's bring Bonnie on. I can't keep her alone backstage. Can we just bring her on?
I'm gonna bring her on, but this is the buildup. But we can bring her on, and I'll say this in front of her because
right.
It's
I love it when you talk in front of
Bonnie
people.
Meyer, who is joining us today from her home in Napa Valley, California, along one of the most delicious stretches of road anywhere in the world. We're thrilled to have her joining us. She's not only the co-founder of Silver Oak Cellars with her late husband, Justin Meyer, but she's also the co-founder of the Meyer Family Vineyards, picking up on a legacy that prizes the art of winemaking. We're going to talk a lot about art today because both of our guests have really juicy stories to tell, and how the word juicy and the way that we think of art are all part of the way that they live their life, make their art, do their work, and share so incredibly generously with all of us. Bonnie Meyer, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. It's good to be here with you.
Bear with me here because I'm going to read from the back of a bottle of Bonnie's Vineyard, the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Oakville, because it's such a charming beginning to the story that we've all now grown to know and love. And we're going to actually enhance a bit today.
Jennifer, can you be a journalist and not a fangirl right now? I mean, you're getting a little crazy.
No.
You're fangirling on Bonnie. You've been talking about Bonnie for 3 days with me.
Yes, I'm going to gush. I'm sorry.
That is not journalism. I want you to stick to journalism.
No. Listen, at the James Beard Awards, they take the media people who are the radio and the TV people, and they give us our whole separate event because they've got to keep the journalists and those really technically unsponsored people and their journalistic integrity separate because they know that's not me.
I think you need to be behind the ropes on this one, though. All right, I'm gonna let you and Bonnie chit chat.
So I'm going to read from the 1974 origin story on the back of the bottle of the Meyer Family Cellars bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. In the spring of 1974, a small pasture of clover was planted to Cabernet Sauvignon and dubbed Bonnie's Vineyard. This was a gift from Justin to his young wife. Together, they nurtured the new vines, their family, and the wines that later made this vineyard famous. So it's with great pleasure that we bring you Bonnie's Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon from this small, celebrated vineyard in front of our family home in Oakville, Napa Valley. And it's signed Bonnie Meyer and Matt Meyer, your son.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very proud that Matt has carried on the tradition started by Justin.
And of course, on the back of the label, it refers to Justin. And like many celebrated people, no last name is needed, although we've already said Meyer. But it's because to the legions of wine lovers in the world, Justin is, of course, Justin Meyer, formerly Brother Justin. We'll get to that part of the story. From Christian Brothers, who became your husband and the founder, along with you, and your business partner of the Silver Oak Cellars, one of the pivot points in the revolution that became the California wine industry. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Justin Meyer as a prelude to the story that we're going to tell about what happens next.
The first word that came to mind is Justin was a character. He was a Christian brother for 15 years. And I used to tell him I never would have married him had he not spent 15 years in the monastery. He was actually sacrilegious, believe it or not. And, he just didn't, one of its greatest qualities was he just didn't take anything too seriously, including anyone who was pious or was following the letter of the law. He joked about everything. Anything was a source of lightheartedness for him.
That sounds like you're describing joy.
He was, yeah, he was full of joy, and again, yeah, lighthearted. We started out our friendship by singing and playing music together. But
Jennifer, do not sing for Bonnie, please. Please spare the viewers. Spare the viewers.
But if I did sing, I would sing How Dry I Am. Just kidding. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Bonnie, one of you is a banjo player and one of you is a guitar player.
Yeah, when I met Justin, he was still a brother. We were at UC Davis. He was getting a master's degree in viticulture. And I had just begun as a freshman studying psychology. And I was invited to his, where he was staying at a professor's house. Professor Omo, since you're so familiar with wines, Dr. Omo is one of the foremost viticulturists in the world. And Justin was not only staying with him, but he was studying with him as well. Well, anyway, I was invited to their home. It was Justin's birthday. I took out my guitar to sing happy birthday, and his eyes lit up, and he went into the back room and came back with his homemade banjo. And we spent the next 2 hours playing music together. That was 1967. And Hootenannies, Peter, Paul, and Mary, Kingston Trio, people were just getting together and singing those songs. So we knew all these songs in common.
A golden moment of folk music. Let's come to the present for the moment and talk about the California wine industry and how important California is today in the world of wine, from where you sit as someone at the literally not only heart but birthing room of the California wine industry.
Well, I'm going to start by talking about the past for a moment. In the late 1960s, when I met Brother Justin, Christian Brothers was one of the largest wineries in the United States and the world. And they were making 40 different varieties at that time. And
excuse me, Bonnie, just to be clear on the history for people, these were both table wines and sacramental wines, correct?
Table, yes, and they were dessert wines and brandy. So there was everything across the board. If it had alcohol in it, they made it.
And to this day, Christian Brothers brandies are some of the most universally accessible California brandies one can enjoy, and their exos just delicious.
Yes. And the brothers were making these wines and brandy to support their schools. They had a mission of teaching poor kids. It started out as poor boys, and then it migrated to poor kids. Well, anyway, you go from then, and Napa Valley at that time, I think, had about 15 wineries. And most of the wine that was made was in gallons, what we call jug wine, and very blended. The Christian Brothers made blended wines, non-vintage. And then you found
some of these, and Bonnie, we should say some of these wines were delicious.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they absolutely were. But you fast forward to today, and Napa Valley has over 500 wineries.
Wow.
And the number of varieties has drastically reduced. I mean, there used to be Carignan and Charbonneau and Alicante Boucher and Green Hungarian were planted here in the Napa Valley in the late 60s, but no longer. Napa Valley, the valley proper is almost all Cabernet Sauvignon. Actually, Silver Oak had a lot to do with that. Some Sauvignon Blanc, and then south is more some Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But the number of varieties that wineries focus on today is drastically reduced, and the quality has risen over time. And of course, the proliferation of wineries.
Bonnie, when we talk about capital F fine arts. We oftentimes will refer to painting and sculpture and dance and for a very long time, we never bundled the culinary arts and the hospitality arts in that capital F fine arts bundle. And today we certainly do. It's still not equal footing. No one's going to necessarily consider winemaking where it should be on par with painting. But can you talk a little bit about being part of the place in the world that helped us introduce that appreciation for the hospitality arts and the capital F fine arts of food and drink, of especially food and wine? You were there, and it was just a very different time. We can't imagine it today, but you were there. Can you take us back?
Wow. Okay. Back then.
Just from the sense that everything that we now think of today in terms of the fine arts of the hospitality arts was growing. We thought of Europe.
Yes.
The greatest chefs came from the Swiss hotel school Escoffier tradition. We thought the best food in the world didn't necessarily come from American regions, but of course now we know better thanks to James Beard and the chefs that brought regional cuisine to life. We thought higher of those Michelin stars and those old traditions, and didn't necessarily realize that we had in our midst such glorious accomplishment and fine art on the table and in the glass. And so what was it like to be there as we were waking up to this?
So going back to the 1960s, if you went to a tasting room,
honestly, I think we were still waking up into the 90s, and today we're still waking up.
Yeah, back then tasting was free. It was very simple. You go to a tasting room, you got a glass of wine, and that was the end of it. It was the beginning of a lot of people being introduced to fine wines, but there wasn't the association of wine and food really at the winery level. Today, so many wineries will actually offer food as part of the tasting experience. And in fact, the title of my book, Perfectly Paired,
I'm going to hold it to say.
It has a double meaning. It refers to the relationship between me and my husband, but we often talk about food and wine pairing. And there is a lot of effort and focus put into pairing, a perfect pairing of wine and food. And when you experience that, it's unforgettable. But wine, people ask me about being in the wine business, and winemaking is an art. It's a science and an art. So a lot of science goes into it. My son Matt was here earlier today, and he was walking the vineyard with a consultant, and they came up with a different idea of how they might tend the vines for maximum potential. And so there's a lot of science. We measure how much water is in the earth. We measure how much water we put on the vines. We measure the minerals that are in the vines and decide. We can actually target what kind of vitamins and minerals a vineyard might need. So there's a lot of science that goes into the grapes, and a lot of science that goes into the winemaking, temperature and choices. But it's the art that makes the difference. You can give 12 winemakers the same grapes, and they will make 12 different wines every time. And the same thing of a chef, right? You can give a chef 12 chefs the same ingredients, and they will come up with something different.
I'll go so far as to say you can give 12 cooks the same recipe and the same ingredients, and you will still get 12 different dishes, because there's something that happens that you describe in your book, and that's one of the things we really were excited to talk to you about today, and that's your use and understanding, appreciation for, and celebration of the word alchemy, which I'm going to ask you to help define for everybody, because to me, it's magic without using the word magic, but it means so very much more, especially in the hands and the heart with the intention of an artist. Can you tell everybody, when you write as you do so beautifully and powerfully and vulnerably in this book, it's a very intimate memoir, and we'll get to that in just a minute, but you allude to and use this word in the fullest scope I've ever seen it used in the realm of food and drink. And I would ask you, what is alchemy to you?
So to me, alchemy is when you take something ordinary and transform it into something extraordinary by what you do. And it can be applied to many things. It's not just about turning lead into gold. Wine is actually, and I didn't know this until just a few years ago, wine has been a symbol of alchemy since the earliest times. And grapes grow all over the world. I think they maybe are not in the Arctic, but other than that, they are everywhere. They're ubiquitous, and they grow wild. And one can make wine out of them, but it's not going to be great wine. So you take those grapes and you start selecting for the best examples of that particular grape. And then over a long period of time, different varietals emerge, as they have in Europe. The only varietal that I know of that people consider native to California, but I don't think it's even native to California, is Zinfandel. It really grew in popularity here, but our varieties come from Europe, and over a long period of time, people really worked hard to select the best clones, the best examples of those varieties. So it started in the vineyard, and then over time, the winemakers have made, I don't know, they carefully, it's like wine, each vintage is like a child. And I have 3 children, and boy, are they different from each other. and I think of the role of a parent, the role of a mother, is to bring out the best in each child. And the same thing with the winemaker. You taste each vintage, and the role of the winemaker is to bring out the absolute best in that, and what you're given, and what that vintage is.
Of course, it should come then as no surprise to anybody who learns the story through your book that Brother Justin was an educator, a teacher, a coach of young people, coaxing them to imagine and dream their best. You were an educator in your own right, and now we see that the intention, that very important intention to make these possibilities manifest, which
right. And what
Silver Oak, is something that I think is sorely lacking in the narratives. What were the intentions? And I think you've come to a place in your life where you've gone back and with this book in particular, been able to really analyze and share what the intentions were that made Silver Oak great, made your marriage enormously successful, and get us to where we're going to go next. And I wanted to have you address how you've come to think of intention as being an important part of any alchemy.
Yes, it certainly is. Our intention, in retrospect, our intention in Silver Oak was to make the best Cabernet that we possibly could, and to have it as a single focus. And we were considered a little crazy just producing one wine, because at that time people were producing usually about 15 different varietals. But we bet it all. And
I'm glad you didn't pick more
Vedra. I'm sorry?
I said, aren't you glad you didn't pick more Vedra?
Yeah, exactly. But in retrospect, I realized today that who we were was certainly reflected in our business and how people felt about Silver Oak, the people who worked for us, the people who were our purveyors, our distributors, and our customers. And that our love for each other, Justin and my love for each other, I really do believe infused the wine and infused everything we did. And that, I wouldn't call that an intention. It was an outcome. But then in retrospect, I realized that that was probably the most important secret sauce that we could have introduced.
Secret sauce, inspiration, intention. Those are which came first words, right?
Right. Yeah.
The reason I wanted to approach our conversation today, which is going to be far too short to cover everything that I really would love to talk to you about, is because in the world of turmoil in which we exist today, in the industry in which you have had a marvelous 50 years, which is almost hard to believe, success dating all the way back to, or nearly 50 years, 40 plus years, that it's very difficult to look around the world of hospitality and restaurants and not see people who have both been inspired and lost faith. And I thought about who we could talk to today to get all of us woken up to the fact that in this moment that the COVID crisis and the racial crisis and the financial outcomes and the recession that has just been designated have all impacted our world with, that we could turn to someone who has had such loss herself and the gift of inspiration and success. And with this book and perspective as our jumping off point, ask you if you'd be good enough to share with us, for all of us in this business struggling at this moment, how do we survive something like this where it feels like we've lost everything? If we've lost our restaurant, it might not open again. It might not open for a while. We've lost our customers. We've actually lost people. Grief has become a part of our world. I know grief is an important part of your story. I know that's a big place to jump off into, but I've read your beautiful book and I've heard interviews with you, and I know that you're the person who can take us there and lead us through this.
So the Perfectly Paired begins with the story of Justin's sudden death. We were on a picnic with friends up in the Sierras, and he had a heart attack and he was gone.
I'm so sorry.
And that was a pivotal moment in my life. Everything changed. And for many months, and I would say even a couple of years after that, I was feeling pretty lost. My identity was challenged. Just a few months before that, we owned Silver Oak. We had just sold Silver Oak. So we owned Silver Oak. I knew what my role was there. I knew what my role in my family was. I was a mother and wife and leader in the wine industry, and then not. So the first thing I needed to do was to very slowly listen to what brought me joy. Justin had become my reason for living, and without him, I was definitely
your joyful soulmate.
Oh, yeah, and so I began to listen for what brought me joy, and over time, in my journey, I decided that it was supporting social entrepreneurs, either nonprofits or investing in them. But that's just a particular. A better answer to your question is to start with joy and a curiosity, and give yourself. I didn't allow myself to grieve for a long time. I was afraid that if I really felt grief, I would fall apart and not be able to put myself back together again. But the real answer is that when we dive into grief, when we really feel it and accept it, we can let it grow, and it can grow us. And grief, more than anything else I've experienced, opened my heart in ways that nothing else could. And I think it's a similar experience for many people. So grief can be a gift, and grief has deep gifts, but we have to dive into it. And once you're there, you see what you have, see the gifts of yourself, your own inner resilience and love that is you. And from there, your own heart, your own intuition will guide you to what's next for you.
There are people who are listening to us and saying, well, you had this marvelous success with Silver Oak, but that's because you were there early. And how could I possibly have any kind of success when, Napa's already happened and, the restaurant industry is in crisis, and that's who I am, and that's how people know me, and that's where I've made my work and my life. And I can't open up because I can't have 50 seats because I needed 100 to just break even barely. So 50 seats isn't going to make it, and I'm facing an uncertain future. That's the common thread, of course. And how can we use this moment? Michael is a big proponent of reestablishing that passion and joy that drove everybody that's in the hospitality industry in any realm, including winemaking and microbrewing, and even if you have a hot dog cart or a 5-star restaurant, whatever you do it from passion and joy. And Michael's opinion and mine is shared in that we hope that we can do things that will reignite some passion to get everyone where they're supposed to go next. Will you talk a little bit about how, Michael, I'm paraphrasing, but you're sitting right there. we talk about this all the time, and it's an important part of your new book, too.
Well, you told me not to talk with Bonnie.
I did not tell you not to talk, dog. He does
yes,
it
you did.
all the time.
Bonnie, she did. She says, this is a very serious person. Don't joke around.
On the air is what I said.
No, well, so one of the things that we see in restaurateurs and anyone in hospitality is the fire in them, right, Bonnie? Like, and you met a lot of guys as they were first coming up, and then they became right. And the big joke is, how do you make $1 million in the restaurant business? Start with 10 million, right? So already we know that your odds are against you to succeed. So what are the things? But this fire inside of them burns off all this negativity, right? It burns, and I'm an entrepreneur. I've always been all my life, and I don't know why. I wish that I wasn't. I'd rather have just been a doctor, right? I'd rather have been a doctor. But you see the fire and the spark in these guys, and you meet them, But then there's other guys like Jeremiah Tower, right? Like, nothing could turn that guy away. You tell him one thing, it fizzles out from his energy, right? It just keeps going. He just keeps moving forward, right? So, but then that you can bring all the way that down to like a pizza shop owner, where they're like, don't do it. But my mom makes these great meatballs. I'm using that recipe. It's going to be amazing. I'm using you like how my accent went? It turned into that. And so all this negativity was burned off, right? But now we're finding these same guys in crisis, Jennifer, the right word, crisis. And they're scared, right? And they have a right to be scared. I understand that. Be scared. But realize that inside of you is what brought you to where you are anyway, right? And I don't necessarily have the right words personally to express that, but I know the feeling. When things get tough, the tough get going. It's one of those Teddy Roosevelt moments, right? Rough Riders. How do you do it? Don't give up. Keep pushing, right? So I think that's, Jennifer, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, Bonnie,
you
write so beautifully and personally about grief. Did grief make you more susceptible to fear? Because there was a fearlessness that you and Justin embarked into the world with as a married couple, as entrepreneurs, as winemakers, as industry leaders. And in your book, you write about those moments when grief, when you lost your husband, was so overwhelming. Did grief make you or cultivate a fear? Is that the derivative of grief?
No, definitely not. I I would say it's the opposite. I've become more fearless as time has gone on. And I'm a 3-time cancer survivor.
Wow.
And I have no fear of death.
I would say me too, but I've only survived once. But that's a lot to be grateful for. So good for you.
So no, fear, no. What? Let me just say that we have, Michael, we have the same joke in the wine business. How to make a big fortune in the wine business is this small fortune is to start with a big one, a small fortune. Anyway, but I would say you're right on. And when Justin and I met, the sum total of our fortune was he had a dog and I had a car. So we didn't start with a lot.
That was always my criteria too. I always said, "Hey, listen, I have a cat. Do you have a car? Let's go. We're going to that."
Exactly. So, so yeah, when you start with nothing, you're pretty scrappy anyway. And I would say that I would characterize a lot of the decisions that I made. I ended up primarily doing marketing for Silver Oak as the business grew. And I would follow the breadcrumbs. I would follow little clues as to what people were really gravitating to, and little by little, making some mistakes along the way, we gradually just kept going and kept growing. At a moment like this, you know, what really came to mind, Michael, was the movie Chef, where you know, a passionate chef just was not able to ply his trade in the way he wanted to at where he was. He gets fired or he leaves, I don't remember which, and starts from his roots, goes back, and with a food truck. In fact, a really trashed food truck, by the way.
But those things aren't, so in reality, like in real life, that's not scary to people like you and I who have started off at building what we've done, right?
Yeah.
You know, Jennifer saw me 20 years ago. I was a few years in, but we have 12 million readers a month now, right? So it's exhausting, but we know we followed the crumbs, and that's exactly what I did. Because, and by the way, while you're following the crumbs, Jennifer, people are trying to sweep them away.
Yeah.
So they're trying to tell you that's not the right crumb. You're following the wrong path. What are you doing? And that was that's one of the things that I was taught by my mentor. It's, you know, you go with your gut, you follow these crumbs, and you know what you're doing. Don't listen to what people are saying. Because every time we went to go in a different path, it was a failure. We learned from it, but it was a failure. It was a good that we learned, but
our hearts, you know, now science is discovering that there are more neurons in our heart and in our gut than they realized at first.
Oh, interesting.
And so literally following your gut or listening to your heartfelt inspiration leads to magic and the very fruitful directions.
We won't have to talk about it today, but this is a book that I would urge anybody that hasn't read it yet to read in this moment in time. Is in addition to perfectly clear, but this is another one, The Power of the Subconscious Mind. Bonnie, we are gonna, I don't want to run out of time, and my next guest, I'm actually going to bring them on to join our conversation. But one of the things that can limit us in a moment like this is everything we've learned up until this point, and one thing that will empower us moving forward is everything we've learned up until this point. It can be our limiting factor or our launch pad. And in your second act, following the untimely death of your husband, you've become an impact investor with a very particular evolved point of view. And in your own way, what you do as an impact investor is your art. You bring the art and the science. And I'm going to imagine that in addition to the spreadsheets, you're listening with your heart and your gut as well. I've heard a little bit in interviews that you've done, but I wanted you to talk about the things that you need to hear from a potential investor partner that might inform or inspire people that are thinking about where they're going to go next in their realm of restaurants? Because I think, well, you may not be starting a charity, and some people would say owning a restaurant is like running a charity. The reality is, it's not whether it's a charity or a restaurant. It's the endeavor that's your passion project. And I was hoping that you could maybe talk a little bit about the kinds of things you feel evidence a successful person's trajectory, and how that might reverse engineer back to where people can go next from this moment of COVID crisis.
First, I want to say something about investing. We spoke about Alchemy earlier, and I have found that Alchemy, when it comes to investing, when you take money, which is fairly ordinary, and people can actually have pretty strong emotions about money. They love it or hate it or feel guilty about it. But money, through Alchemy, through investing in things that make the world better, make the soil better, make society better, that is a form of alchemy. You're taking something very ordinary and transforming it into something beautiful and life-giving, a life force. In terms of things that I look for when I'm considering investing in someone, I don't want to know what great idea they have, because an idea is not a business.
Right.
A business plan is not a business. I want to know how strong their team is, and if they have a real balance in their team. Do they have everything covered, like marketing and finance and leadership and the creative genius? But the creative genius is not the one I invest in. I've made mistakes doing that, actually.
We all have.
So those are important things. But then I think a lot of people that I speak with are talking about the new economy. Well, what is the new economy? And I believe, and I have to say I have a spiritual orientation, but I believe that the new economy, one of the primary characteristics that's needed is a spirit of generosity. And that I see when businesses are generous or trusting, especially in hard times, it makes a huge difference. I was relating to somebody earlier today that the day after the San Francisco earthquake, Giannini was on the streets, on the sidewalk in San Francisco with a card table and money to lend. And nobody filled out any forms for a loan. It was all based on trust. And it was that created the Bank of America.
Oh, wow.
That generosity of spirit and that trust.
And Bonnie, you don't know this about Michael, but he's one of the most generous human beings I've ever met. And
I don't like to talk about that, though. That's not. I have a deep problem with that, right? With marketing for giving, right? That I don't like that. I don't. That's a whole nother. It's called cause marketing. It's called cause marketing, and I don't like it. I don't like it.
So this is another.
It's not really giving. You're giving to receive a lot of times, right?
Well, that's right. So you got to be really honest about where it's coming from, and
Right.
people can tell, right?
Bonnie,
Yeah.
I live in Las Vegas, and there's people here that I'm not even going to say names. I did write about him in my book, though. And he's a very big wholesaler, distributor, right? Mm-hmm. And you would go to a table, and you would go to an event, and I'm sure Bonnie was probably at some of these events, and his name is on the table, donated by blah, 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 right? And I was like, what is going on here? Like, then it's not really a donation. What are you doing? This is most bizarre. No. And by the way, he wasn't donating it because he was going to people like Bonnie and Justin and getting cases to, right? So it wasn't like someone was writing a check. And I'm like, oh my. But I learned that, and I never said anything. This is the first time I've ever mentioned it. But it was ingrained. And I realized at that point how disturbing it doesn't look good. It just doesn't. Yeah. So it's interesting. Jennifer, you probably know what I mean, right?
Well, what I know is that our next guest, Sorella Martinez, is one of the most celebrated restaurateurs in the world. She is not only part of a 3-generation family of celebrated chefs, daughter of the original author of a cookbook of traditional Mexican recipes. Her mother, Aida Gabalanda, was one of the great ladies from a time before celebrated chefs became celebrated. And of course, she's the mother of Aaron Sanchez from Food Network and was due to be the star of a brand new show. And he was the cover.
That guy?
Yes.
She's having, oh, here she is. I was having technical difficulty with her. Hold on. I think let me get this handsome man off of my.
How are you?
Wait, she's muted. Let's get her unmuted somehow. Let me see if I can do that. I think I can. I can.
Sorella Martinez. We're going to work on the technicals. But put a picture of our own back up on Food and Beverage Magazine.
What a handsome guy.
But I'm trying. Let me hold on, Jennifer. Let me just try to unmute her. Unmute her mic. Sorella, you're muted. You cannot unmute your mic because
I'm unmuted.
There you are, my darling. How are you?
I'm good. You know, right now I'm very busy because I just got the designs for my new website.
Yes.
And they look very cool. And they're having all this trouble with this phone. I have the strips that I glue it to, and it doesn't stay up there.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, I'm moving around a lot with the dyskinesia. You know,
from her test kitchen and home in New York City, where first of all, we've got to say, with the epicenter of the COVID crisis, how long have you been shut in, and are you okay? You look marvelous.
I've been here since March 16th, but I have gone out to buy cat food. Everybody else brings me whatever I want. You know, I want some nopales from 116th Street. That's fine. I want some pomegranate molasses from Kaluskians. There you go. And of course, I invite them for the dinner, so that's a lot of fun. But I have the most incredible ingredients here because everybody is willing to go get them for me. It's been fun.
Sorella, I want to introduce you to Bonnie Meyer. She's our other guest today, and she was the co-founder of Silver Oak Cellars, which when restaurant Sorella was at the zenith of what was going on in the culinary world in New York, and when you were doing dinners at the White House for the Reagans, Silver Oak was a part of the culinary world's stratosphere at that time. So the two of you have so much in common from operating in that and making your art in that part of the culinary world at the time. And I thought it was apropos to have you on together today.
Yeah, she said you're into investing, huh?
I am. Good to meet you, Sorella.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, Silver Oak was served at the White House a couple times actually during that era, which we were very proud of. Mm-hmm.
So the question that we're addressing today, as so many young restaurateurs, operators, professionals in the hospitality industry and the food and wine industry are facing uncertainty. But ours is an industry that has historically always had a measure of uncertainty to it. There's never really been a sure time to be in the food business or the wine business. And the things that have been necessary to thrive in those times might be the things we need now, or they may no longer be those same things that will get us through. And so I wanted to raise the question with both of you about what do you think we're facing at this moment? And do you see any similarities to any moments in our past, in our history in the food business?
I don't know. I mean, as far as I think it's like an interesting time to buy stuff, but people don't have money. So maybe in that sense, people are going to open on a shoestring. I can't imagine high expensive restaurants are going to survive.
Yeah.
You know, because people got used to eating really good food at home. A lot of people, I mean.
When you started your restaurant, you didn't have the backing of, teams of venture capital and financiers. There was a certain measure of uncertainty then. What were the characteristics that you drew upon to be successful in your first restaurants?
Well, you have to be you have to take chances. You know, I signed a very, very um, risky contract called a management contract that I could keep the liquor license until I got mine. Never expecting that I was going to have a lot of trouble. And I couldn't even control my checkbook. So every week he would take $3,000 from my account for me to use the liquor license.
Right.
And this is, remember that this is right as soon as that recession hit, in October 17th, my birthday, 1987.
Yep.
So it was a tough time, but I think that a lot of restaurants can rise up from the ashes like that in this period.
Both you and Bonnie, sadly, are widows. And yet, I don't think either of you define the work that you do today, the person that you are today. If I asked you what were the 5 words you'd use to describe yourself, would you even use that as one of the defining characteristics of who you are?
No, but I would use mother.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be like a very big thing for me to use the word mother.
Mother.
Yeah,
Bonnie, I'm going to assume you're in that.
Yes, I would consider myself a mother, an investor, a musician. What else? A friend. I have so many. I have such a wealth of friendships, and at moments a mystic. So I define myself in those ways, not as a widow.
I would describe myself as a pioneer, as fearless, as very kind of perfectionist and original.
Ooh, I need to write these down. Pioneer.
Original. Fearless. And then I took a lot of chances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Sorella, I always think of you as an artist, and it's no small coincidence that artists flock to you like a moth to a flame. I have always assumed and believed it was because you too are the spirit of an artist as well as an entrepreneur, and it's that combination of artist and entrepreneur that this moment call for.
Well, you know, what's something that I've discovered in the last 2 days, because I'm representing a medicine that is helping me a lot with the Parkinson's.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you on that one. I apologize.
I said that I'm representing this medicine that is helping me a lot with the Parkinson's that I'm not going to mention. But so I'm listening to a lot of webinars about Parkinson's because I'm going to have to give some. And everybody talks about what great creativity it gives you. And remember I told you about that? It's fascinating.
Well, what's interesting is Michael and I have a friend. Of course, he was a very dear friend of Michael's, Chef Kerry Simon. And when we were talking about your journey and your path with Parkinson's, we were talking about Kerry and how challenging that proved to be for him. And I know we both are joining you in that courage. Talk a little bit about that, Michael, would you please?
About the courage that it's when your body fails you, but your mind is
up the fight. I mean, that's the whole point. Is I live with multiple sclerosis. I don't usually talk about it, but it's the same thing. It's these misunderstood neurological. There's a certain racism to them, right?
But when you're a fighter, you're a fighter.
And you have to control them. There are ways of controlling them. You have to choose the way you feel.
Right, you could choose to
That's
feel
what
good or you could choose to feel
like
bad.
right now, I wish I could
Right.
choose to stop moving, but
Yeah.
whenever I'm doing this kind of stuff, I get really bad dyskinesia. There we go.
Let me say something about that. And that is what earlier we were talking about finding your joy. And one of the greatest freedom that human beings have is to choose our attitude.
Right.
And we can choose joy and peace no matter what the circumstances are. And then we always feel better, right? Even if we're in pain or discomfort.
Yeah, I have a philosophy of life that I say to myself, can I do something about this? Whether it's like that I was late or whether somebody insulted me or whatever. And if I can, I do it right away. And if I can't, I just walk away and deal with it at another time when it's more appropriate.
That's a great philosophy.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you don't get yourself angry or whatever else at that moment if you can save it. Aren't we philosophical tonight?
Here's some fabulous pictures that I found.
Oh,
Look at this gorgeous woman.
look at that.
Her home is an amazing place. And of course, her cuisine is beyond what any of us could have imagined. There they are.
Well, we're doing this podcast together, Aaron and I. And we're ready to launch, but Heritage Radio wants us to try to raise some money. And, because they haven't gotten any because of the pandemic. So anyway, we're doing this podcast very soon called Cooking in Mexican from A to Z. And every program is dedicated to one ingredient. So
Oh,
it's really fun. And we're bringing really cool guests in. And Adora's a wonderful interviewer, and I tell stories. We're having a great time with it.
Well, we had him on our cover of Food and Beverage Magazine a few years ago. And lots of girls called and wanted a free copy.
What?
They wanted a pinup.
Yes. When we had him on the cover of the magazine, lots of girls were
He is
called.
the sexiest man, People's Magazine, one of the sexiest men.
And we should mention that Aaron is a twin if we haven't talked about that yet.
No, and you know what? He's a fantastic cook, and people are starting to follow him on Instagram.
Oh, neat. And so the name of the new podcast that you can tune into and listen to Sorella and Aaron, and it will have the spirit of Aida Gabilondo as well, is called
Cooking in Mexican from A to Z.
Cooking in Mexican from A to Z.
And it's going to be on Heritage Radio Network.
The Heritage Radio Network, which is based out of New York. I think that's really marvelous. Before we let everybody go, and I do want to say thank you for being with us today. I'm thinking about everybody out there. I'm going to call them kids because this is still, the hospitality industry is by and large a young person's game, but in every realm, for everybody that's in any aspect of this business. In fact, I was talking to John Boyadjian today about this very thing, and we were looking in our crystal balls and thinking, where do we go next, and what happens next, what comes next. And I wanted to ask each of you, as you look in your crystal ball for what I consider our kids in the business, what do you see in your crystal ball?
Like I told you, I think that little mom and pop places and places that do not require a lot of investment are going to make it, because a lot of these kids have really original ideas about the food. It might not always be the delicious, but it's usually the hospitality is really nice. So, I've gone to a lot of these restaurants owned by people who are not, it's not a vocation, it's an avocation.
Right.
So for now, a lot of
Ooh, I
restaurants
like
are
that.
going to be like that, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to fill in the gaps.
Here,
Sorella, do you think the food halls is a good place for these kids or these young people to start? So they just have sort of smaller booths or sections?
Or a
Something
lower
happened?
overhead?
What's happening?
We see you.
How do you like my big glasses?
I love them. I was going to mention them.
I'm
This
gonna
is the
get
first
my.
time I've seen them on you. They look fabulous.
Well, finally, I'm getting my cataract operated on, and
Oh,
I've been going through a really hard time because I can't see, even with these huge glasses.
Mm.
So it's been hard to get work done, but here I am. And I thank you so much for inviting me, Jennifer, on yet another new platform.
Hmm.
You're so innovative.
Well, and I would like to answer that question.
Yes,
You know,
Bonnie.
a few years ago, it was against the policies locally here in the Napa Valley to have seating outside on the sidewalk. And now restaurants are being told that they can open, that if you have outside space, you have a lot more opportunity. And I think that we're going to head in the direction of Europe and having a lot more outside space, being dining al fresco in that way, which
That's a great
I
idea.
love. And yes, I agree with Sorella. Yeah, being small is going to be an advantage at this point. And innovative and fearless. I love that you said fearless, because that is such an important part of what's going to be required in the next few years.
Yes. But
Bonnie,
people are trying to go out.
Bonnie, one of the things that I wanted to make sure we talked about today, in addition to your book and your investing work, is the idea that you have come on the other side of your experience as a widow and as a cancer survivor to a place of not only enormous gratitude, but you've got an enhanced, what I'll call awareness. And people might assume that because you were a spiritual person in your early life, and that you had a very beautiful partnership with Brother Justin, who you later married, who had his roots in a religious tradition, that it might automatically mean that you're a spiritual person. But I'm particularly interested in how that identification as a spiritual person has changed for you and what that brings you in this moment in time.
Well, I'm one of the majority of Americans that define themselves these days as being spiritual, not religious. So Justin and I both started out as being very religious, and I would not say that that's true anymore. That in my reading, my studies, my thought process, I realized at some point that if we're looking for the truth, it resides in that place where all religions come together, and is beyond religion and beyond belief.
When you talk in your book and in your public life,
Mm-hmm.
on your website, which we should tell everybody is bonniemeyer.com.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your book, because I missed that.
Oh, Sorella, I'll make sure we get one sent to you. I'm almost done with mine, and I'll send it to you. It's so good. It's called Perfectly Paired. Well, why am I telling you? The author's right here. Let's read this.
The subtitle is The Love Affair Behind Silver Oak Cellars. So it talks about the love affair between me and Justin, how that infused our life, our wine, our business, and my life going forward.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I had a great love and he died, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But nice.
Well, and one thing I might add is that my relationship with Justin continues. He died almost 20 years ago now.
Wow.
And in the beginning, there were many, sometimes hilarious ways that he would let me know that he was present. And then
your hair dryer or something to that effect.
That hair dryer, the story is hilarious. But then over time, I learned how to connect with him through meditation, and then now at present, I really feel his presence in every moment. All I need to do is think about him, and I feel his big bear hug. And so one of the things that we don't talk about in our culture very much is how we can stay connected and how relationships can even grow beyond death. So it's just one example of many that we are more than our bodies, that we are a spirit having a human experience instead of a human having a spiritual experience.
Sorella, thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
Thank you, Penny.
You know I love you.
Good to meet everybody.
Really nice
Hi, darling.
to meet you, Sorella.
And stay at least 6 feet away from all those people, okay? You're a national treasure.
I'm being very good because I have to. But anyway, lots of love to you, and thank you so much. Congratulations on your new show and platform.
And
It's
good
been
luck.
a lot of fun. Good to meet you, Bonnie.
Good to meet you, Sorella.
And
Thank
good
you,
luck with
Sorella.
the podcast.
Good luck with have fun with the podcast.
I'll let you know when the podcast.
I'll volunteer anytime. I have a few favorite ingredients from the desert Southwest. But I hope people know that this entire region where I happen to be broadcasting from at the moment, that may technically be called Tucson, is broadly known as Sonora. And we are one of the cities of gastronomy designated by UNESCO, because this region for 4,000 years has been where peoples have come to cultivate food. And it's one of the longest continuously cultivated places anywhere in North America. And we have a tradition, because I believe if you're cultivating food, it means you're growing food. And if you're growing food, you're growing medicine, and you're growing sharing and conviviality and hospitality. You cannot make food and grow food and not share food. And so it is in that tradition that this Sonoran region, Sorella, I have to raise my hand because you are originally from Agua Prieta.
Yep.
And you grew up being nourished by the tradition of Sonora.
And having a ball. Agua Prieta was so much fun. It was just a great time. Like early 60s. We used to have our little casino dances, tea dances every Saturday and Sunday. Close up streets, put on a band on it and go down the streets and dance and serenade people. It was fun. It's really, really fun.
Jennifer, do you do that? Do you do that, Jennifer? Do you serenade people in the street?
I go to tea dances in my party dress, and I celebrate the. You're going to laugh at me because I know you make fun of the fact that I use this word. I believe that this is one of the most convivial regions of the world. If you go to Hermosillo, Sonora, it is one of the most convivial cities I've ever been to in my entire life.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What a beautiful
There
All
is
of my relatives. All my relatives are there in Hermosillo. Martinez, Corella,
and everything is a joyful celebration around table. That's what we try and capture here. And, what's that, my love?
I wish I was there to go to dinner with you.
I wish you were here. Thank you. I wish you were too. We'll do it again soon.
Soon enough.
And
Bye.
Bonnie, bye, hon. And Bonnie, thank you for being our virtual guest / co-host today. You've been wonderful to stay with us, but I was hoping that we would unpack and unbundle this idea that you and Sorella embody so beautifully.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I want to
Can
give
Bonnie come back? Is Bonnie allowed back, Jennifer?
Oh, anytime she, well, you know.
I just want to make sure. I mean,
I want to
make sure.
I want to give Bonnie the last word, though, and ask her to talk about, love and joy. And she can talk about wine, too, because that's played a big role. But what was really striking to me when I discovered her story, the way that I discovered it through this book, Perfectly Paired, is that it's much more about love and joy than wine. And I want to give you the last word on that.
Well, I would say first that we too often think of love and joy as emotions, and they actually are a state of being. and they're available to us anytime. And if you're going to live life, why not choose love and joy to be as a place to live? It just makes life better. So that's
Beautiful.
my last word on that.
And Michael, I'm going to tell you, the love and joy are the secret ingredients to every irresistible dish and every irresistible sip.
Yeah.
And pride and joy are the secret to cleaning.
Pride and joy are what us mothers like to say.
No, you know what I'm saying, Bonnie? Bonnie gets it, Jennifer. This went right over your head. Right over your head, Jen. I wish I had a graphic for that.
Maybe she doesn't spend enough time with cleaning products. I don't know.
No, evidently not. She must have had a silver spoon in her mouth, Jen, from New Hampshire, wherever you're from up there.
From Boston.
Boston. Thank you, Bonnie, for joining us so much. Thanks for taking
You're very
the time.
welcome.
Bonnie, thank you.
Wow. I always say wow, don't I? That's like, I'm like Ed McMahon. Whoa, I say wow. Beautiful people. Beautiful
I don't think you say wow like it's a script. I genuinely think wow comes out of you because we get wow.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know that I said wow yesterday. Wow. Bonnie's nice. I want to go up there and I want to put on like a big white outfit and I just want to sit with her for hours. You know what I mean? I want to just
right? Like, isn't her energy amazing?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. But it's beautiful because of success. You know what I'm saying? And it's nice to see someone with beautiful energy in our industry be successful. Because everybody that I've met in the industry is just horrendous, Jennifer. We go over this all. We list the people, and it's like, can you believe this? It's
Yeah, but
and I think
they're not the people that we have on the show. We find the people that do it the right way and are successful.
Do you think Bonnie knew who I was talking about? The donation guy?
I'm going to say yes.
I think she did. She looked like she did. She would never say that, Bonnie. That Bonnie Meyer would never say, but I think she did. But isn't that interesting that act of his thought, people will look at that as an act of kindness, and I saw that as an act of selfishness, right? And it's burned into my being, never to be like that. Like if I do something, you'll never say, well, Food and Beverage Magazine gave this kid a scholarship or this, that, or that. We'll just do it. We'll just do it. You don't need to tell people. It's okay. You know, what I'm doing right now is I'm creating the Food and Beverage Magazine test kitchens all over the country, right? All over the country. We're going to open up spaces now. There's a lot of restaurants available. And we're going to have all these kids that want to cook. They're going to be able to come in and they're going to cook for their friends. They're going to be able to make money. And they're going to have their own restaurant for a night, right? And this is going to go on all over the country. And we're already scouting sites. But we're going to have a little resource center. We're going to do a lot of charity with it, obviously. We're not charging everybody because some kids can't afford it. You know what I mean? Right. But no one has to know that. I mean, I'm telling you, Jennifer, and no one else. So whoever hears this, shh. But it's a great idea because it's giving the opportunity of these great kids that are in school cooking and learning how to become chefs and learning how to become somms. And we want to bring them in and have them let's be convivial, right? Let's show the hospitality. Let's feed your friends. Yeah, you can charge them. You can make money, make it a business because it's a restaurateur. You're still an entrepreneur, and you got to learn that. But who better to teach that than the author of this book, Food and Beverage Magazine's Guide to Restaurant Success, huh? Who's better to teach them how to be successful? And back to what Sorella said, in my book, this book, Jennifer, talks about how to open a restaurant for under $25,000. Right. And it can be done. And I like it. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome because she's right. You got to feed your family, you know, and if you take your ego out of it all, you can do that.
Well, I was going to say, let's build that one step further. If your restaurant needs to be a monument to you, as opposed to a gift to your guest and a vehicle for connecting with your guest, that to me seems to be one of those success factors. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter how big you were before COVID. We're getting like whoosh, a clean slate.
You know who's a perfect example of that? Jimmy Sneed. You know Jimmy Sneed, Chef Jimmy?
No.
No? The Frog and the Redneck, his partner, Paladin,
No.
Jean-Louis. And he's
in DC.
It was in DC at the Watergate. And
yeah, okay.
And Jimmy, it was called the Frog and the Frog was Paladin and Jimmy was the Redneck from Virginia or wherever. And he always did that. You know, it wasn't a monument to himself. It was a joke. It was like the Redneck and the Frog. Great chefs from around the right. And look what they've done. And then they build a beautiful restaurant and a beautiful careers. And you're right. That's what it's about.
And to a person, when Jean-Louis Paladin passed away, not a single person did anything but weep. For our industry lost one of the greatest greats we had, not by virtue of the volume of meals or profits they made, but because he was and remains an example of everything that's great about this business.
Yeah, and then I was very big in that time. I don't think I talk. We were very big when Robin Leach was alive, and Robin and I would do a lot of these things. We would always try to do as much as we could for that foundation here in Vegas, because a lot of those chefs that worked with him and close friends of his were here.
Yeah.
Right? So I actually have a big plate where they commemorated Robin for being the host of one of the events. That after Robin passed, I got the plate. It was, it was a beautiful thing.
One of the things I hope the takeaway is from today's show is that when you lose everything and it feels like the end, that if we listen to Bonnie and to Sorella and to your gut, you know that this is not the end. You know that there is a path forward, and it will look different. It might taste different. It might smell different. It might be different. It'll be different. We might not know what it is. So long as you have faith of some sort in yourself that will triumph over the fear of what if we don't make it? What if people don't like my food? What if I get a bad landlord? You know, all those things.
But different is good.
Different is really.
And when you started, the what ifs were all burned away.
Yeah.
Because you knew the what ifs. So now it's time to get up, kick off the dust, and ease on back down that road. And it will be fine. It will be fine. But because now I think at this point with the pandemic, egos are out of this. So watch how much better people do. Get your ego out of the way. They're not going to trip over themselves.
That's true. I mean, I'm not going to.
I'm waiting for your ego to go away. I mean, it's really hard to co-host with you, but you are one ego-driven lady. I'll tell you that.
I am such a pain in the neck. But, you know, I will say this: every day I pray to live and exist without an ego, and hang on, I've got it right here.
And every day I don't assume ever.
I have all these books at my.
How do you know of the 4 agreements? Yes, you can never assume. Do never assume. Don't ever assume. And by the way, the other thing besides assuming is don't take anything personal, because believe me, nobody's thinking about you the way you think they're thinking about you.
That's right.
That's it.
Personally, no matter how even if someone's standing there going, and you, it's not personal, because it's not about you.
No, it's about, don't take it personal and don't assume. It's the two most, I teach my kids this, and they do it, and I hear them with the crap, the 22-year-old girl with all the sorority sisters and I'm like, oh, do you think they're really thinking about you? I think you're taking this a little too personal, and you're assuming they're talking about you, and no one's talking about anybody. That's just very top of the line, but that's what I tell my 3-year-old. I tell my 3-year-old, Jet, don't assume anything. If you got to make a potty, you go to the potty. Don't assume you're going to be able to hold it in.
So today was a day that we turned you on to some of our favorite books. Do you want to start?
No, this book?
Yes.
No, I don't know. I think Bonnie's might be my favorite now.
Favorite books day here.
I want to see everybody have this many copies, though. That's for sure. Go ahead.
And then you've got Perfectly Paired.
Beautiful book. Wine lovers and love lovers and joy lovers should all read it.
Because joy, hello, joy is the secret ingredient.
That's right. Beautiful.
I'm recommending these for a reason, everybody. Bonnie talked about listen to your gut. You know what your gut is?
It's getting hungry because you won't stop talking.
The subconscious mind. And last but not least, we've never gone through like get all these books before, but you'd be extremely well served to.
We should do a book list somewhere. Do you think anybody would look? Here's Jennifer English's book list.
Well, they might look at Michael Politz's book list.
Yeah, right. The other way they'd look.
Here's
They'd
a
look
Michael.
the other
Everybody
way.
that knows me knows that I have like 5,000 cookbooks. That I'm
I have a lot, and I have some of Carrie Simon's. Such a beautiful thing.
You lucky. They're beautiful books. Hey, listen.
Right. Yes.
Tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
drum roll,
Drum roll, please.
even bigger than today.
Never. Nothing's bigger than today. Who's bigger than Bonnie Meyer? Come on.
You're just going to have to tune in to check us.
Whoa. Wow. Well, thank you. And I think fairly well. You want to say your final thought?
Well, I do. I want to say find the joy. And remember that love is infinite. Hug your kid and count your blessings. We'll see you tomorrow.
Au revoir.
So do you want